Welcome back to One Piece Anime Review. This is special number 2, part 2. In this one, I'm giving my top 15 male characters who are not Luffy. Yeah, I had to point that out there because Luffy overall my favorite character for the series, but my male character is who my number 1 is basically. Because Luffy overall, people love this guy, so why not? So let's start off with my honorable mentions. I got a few of them. At least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, at least 7 of them. Yeah, 7 honorable mentions. My honorable mentions are Blackbeard, Shanks, Rob Lucci, Whitebeard, Silver Israeli, Smoker, and Trafalgar Law. Now, Blackbeard, great character. Last time he was seen physically on screen, I would probably say it could have been, I think it was Marineford. Yeah, it was Marineford was the last time he was seen. But he's a great character. I mean, he was introduced during the Skypiea arc, and the thing with this guy is he's 11 feet tall. He's a bit overweight, which the way he dresses like a typical pirate when we think of pirates. Having his shirt open. I mean, design wise, he kind of reminds me of an anime version of Long John Silver. Yeah, from Treasure Island. I think it was from one of the cartoon versions I actually saw of Treasure Island. Yeah, this version reminds me of that. But he's a lot taller. He's like 11 feet tall. Yeah. Silver Israeli, first mate of Captain Gold Roger. Great character, first introduced during Saba Odi arc. Then after that, he's not seen again until post-war. Great, and he was also featured in one of my favorite specials, special number 8, along Boa Hancock. I forgot to mention that during part 1. Yeah, she was featured in that one as well, and she fought alongside Luffy that most of the special, which I thought was really good. Too bad she never appeared in the movies. I would have thought maybe she would show up in the last few films that came out, but nope. It's like the people who made the movies didn't bother to put her in there. But one of the characters I mentioned did make it to the movies. As a matter of fact, the last movie that came out. I will get to him in a minute. But, yeah. Silver Israeli, great character. And the guy who trained Luffy to use his haki. Shanks, the guy who gave him his hat. And he was an apprentice under, and I think he knew Silver Israeli. He's one of those characters that's referenced a lot on the show, and he's appeared several times. He's come close to being able to Luffy at the end of Marineford. We never got a chance to talk to him. Okay. Smoker, first appeared in Rogue Town. Popped up in Alabasta. He also popped up in Marineford. Punk Hazard and Dressrosa. Popped up several times. Great character. He's sort of a frenemy to the Straw Hats. And he actually did work alongside the Straw Hats at Punk Hazard. It was just great to see the guy in Punk Hazard, and the fact that he's one of the more interesting ones in the Marines, and not like crooked like half of them. Half the Marines that appear on screen usually are pretty bad characters, or pretty bad people, and they do very stupid things. He does not do stupid things, and when he was last seen, he started the series as a captain, and as of recently, as of when he was last seen, Dressrosa, he is a vice admiral. Yeah. So after Alabasta got promoted to the Commodore. And eventually later on after time skip he got promoted to the Vice Admiral, which is great. The fact he got a chance to promote to that. Yeah, great character. Whitebeard. A character who showed up several times throughout part 1. Died at the end of Marineford. Very tall guy. I think he's like over 15 feet tall. He's and they mentioned how old he was when he died. He was 72, and this guy was shot, stabbed, burned. This guy had over 400 wounds in his body, and he died standing up. Probably one of the bravest men in the whole franchise. And the fact that, well, when he's called Whitebeard is because he's called that because he has a white mustache, a very thin one that points up like this. I'm like, that's the reason why you call him Whitebeard? Okay. Oh yeah, and he apparently was an old friend of Gold Roger. He was kind of like an old rival in a way, but he knew him, but he would never actually. Some people call him the guy who was near the throne, but never sat on it. Basically, it was close to the position of King of Pirates, but never wanted it. Yeah. Um, Rob Lucci, a guy who did appear in the film Gold, along with Spada, one of the most despised characters in the whole franchise. I don't care for this character at all. As a matter of fact, when you show like, oh man, not this guy again. I really like him. Rob Lucci, he's a pretty interesting character himself, because I mean, yeah, he's got devil power. He turns into I think it's a gazelle, but he's strong. He's basically the government's assassin, and he's very good at his job. As a matter of fact, it's one of his early missions he did when he was 13, and um, I basically don't get exactly why he decided to do the thing he did in a flashback where he killed 500 hostages just because this country was stalling to take out these dumb pirates. Um, but yeah, so great character, nonetheless. So now, moving on. Oh yeah, almost forgot. Trafalgar Law. First show up at Sabaody, then show up again at the end Marineford. He showed up again in post-war, and he popped up also in. He was also a regular character in Punk Hazard and Dressrosa, and of course Zoo. He's been absent. He actually was last seen at the end of Zoo arc. Excuse me, but he might be coming back soon. Interesting character. I love the fact Dressrosa actually expanded upon him really well, and the fact he had a history with Doflamingo. Yeah, but now moving on to my top 15. 15, Aokiji, the guy who's like 8.5 feet tall, and based upon a dead actor. Yeah, constantly seen when he was in the Marines. Very tall, thin, wear this blinder thing on his forehead a lot of the time. Uh, Always dressed very fancy, but then like after the time skip, it's like I get the fact I knew he fought the guy who currently is the Fleet Admiral and lost his arm, but it looked like he also put on a little bit of weight as well. I'm like, seriously? So after you left the Navy, you decided to put on some weight? I don't get it, but he's an awesome character, and the fact that he's actually appeared in one of the films. He appeared in the film Z. It was actually the second film I actually seen, and I'm glad the fact he showed up in there. And in fact, he met up with my favorite character, which I'll get to him soon. Great character, and of all the admirals introduced, he's one of my personal favorite ones, because he's that interesting and he's very thin too. Um, if anybody would cast it like I know about the whole live action One Piece thing, because the way he looks, I would say the best type of person to be cast to play Aokiji is probably a black guy, probably of Japanese descent. Yeah. Number 4, Mr. 3, the guy who makes candles. Great character, and he actually was one of my other ones, favorite characters in this list. And he became sort of his subordinate, but he first introduced during Little Garden. Came back in Alabasta for a little bit, disappeared. Was seen again impelled down, and he was seen, of course, in Marineford, and post-war, and then he was never seen again. He did show up in the special, which I'm very happy he did. He showed up in a special, and he later returned at the start of the Zoo arc. So it's like after a post-war, he showed up maybe a couple times, but he's an interesting person. He's quite interesting. In fact, he worked with somebody who's one of the first villains to the franchise. I think it's great. Yep. All right. Number 13, Crocodile, although aka Sir Crocodile, the only character with a hook and a scar on his face. Yeah, and he was the second warlord introduced in the series. Yeah, he was the second one ever introduced because the first one was one of my other ones, which I'll talk about him soon. Interesting villain. Being the main villain of the Brock Work store was actually really good. In fact, they actually slowly built up to his reveal of who he really is. It's like, okay, he first appeared mentioned like Mr. Zero, and we're like, who the heck this guy is? And of course, they revealed at the end of Whiskey Peak it's actually this guy Crocodile. Though they didn't show him until like I think it was after Little Garden. I think it was that was the first time I actually saw him. But of the Straw Hats of the first 6 that the show had, he met 5 of them. The only one he never met was Sanji. He spoke to him a couple times over a transponder snail, but never actually met him. I don't really know why, just that's just the way he is. And the fact that after Alabasta, he wasn't seen again until Impelled Down, showed up in Marineford. and since show up a couple times after that, usually in very small appearances. But yeah, interesting character. Um, and he's one badass of a fighter too, especially since this guy's made of sand. Surprised Luffy didn't call him Sandy. All right, number 12, the second commander of the Straw Hat Fleet, Martimo. Yeah, the guy who's kind of gross, but he's a big fan of the Straw Hat crew. As a matter of fact, he decked out his ship basically if you like the Straw Hats. Like, he calls like going Luffy Senpai. Yeah, great ship. Interesting character, and the fact he's a barrier human, where he can create barriers, and he also creates stairs. Um, Plus, he can also kind of use his barriers as a weapon as well, which makes him kind of interesting. Um, the only reason I listen to higher than Crocodile is because he's still being featured, and he's part of the Straw Hat Fleet. Despite the fact he's kind of a gross guy. Basically, he constantly picks his nose, but Luffy does the same thing. And also, he did something else quite gross. He actually decided to urinate in public in a gladiatory arena and embarrass the Fishman. So much so that he wouldn't speak of it. I think he's a cool character in the fact he stuck around and he helped Robin during Dressrosa, and also he was featured in the Silvermine arc where they basically explored where they mentioned that the smoking hot woman who's basically a female version of him, except that she's a lot more hotter and not as gross as he is. Basically, is someone who grew up with him, which interesting. The fact that she's kind of like him, except that he basically acts like the flying fisherman pirates. Yep, but interesting guy. I like the fact this guy has basically followed the Straw Hats since Longtown, which is great. And he didn't know who Usopp was, which I thought was quite funny because, well, they put the wrong picture up for his bounty. But yeah, that was number 12. Number 11 is actually a tie, one of two ties, and that's Luffy's brothers, Ace and Sabo. Excuse me. Ace first seen in he actually first appeared at the end of the Drum Kingdom, sort of like a flashback. First showed up there, then he showed up in Alabasta for about a good half of it. Then he disappeared, wasn't seen again until I think it was just before Sabaody. Yeah, there was I think it was just after. I think it was during Waters. I think it was during Edward's Lobby. That's when he fought Blackbeard and lost. Of course, we're seeing him get impaled down, and he died. And actually, he's one of two characters on my list, basically, who's actually died. Yeah, he died in Marineford. He got killed by the Admiral who gave Luffy his scar. And the fact that his power basically is that he can basically shoot fire out of his hands. And of course, Sabo, basically, his other brother, who was introduced in the flashback in post-war, came back and Mother Nature he's actually survived, but he has a scar in his eye. And here's something weird about him. He's basically worn the same clothing for 12 years. But yeah, he's gotten taller, but it's kind of odd, though. He's worn the same exact clothing, like same hat, same exact clothing he was last seen when he was a child. It's just quite odd that he decided not to change clothing. And apparently he's also king of a country, which apparently he doesn't recognize. Odd. But interesting guy. And the fact this guy is the chief of staff of the Revolutionary Army, and he's the only member of the Revolutionary Army who actually has a bounty on his head. And his bounty's higher than Luffy's. I heard his bounty is like 600 million berries, which I've heard a lot of people were not happy the fact his bounty was higher than Luffy's. My guess is because he's part of the Revolutionary Army and he's basically worked under Dragon, Luffy's father. Yeah. So yeah, moving on. Number 10, one of the other warlords, Draco Hakai Mihawk. Great character. First introduced during the Bastille arc. Popped up a few times since then. His last known physical appearance, off the top of my head, was probably Return to Sabaody. I think his picture's been seen a couple times since then. But actually making physical appearances show, not since Return to Sabaody. But like one of the many other characters, he did show up in the 8th special, which I'm very glad he did. Because one of those characters did show up there, and him, of course, along with Boa Hancock, Petra, Mr. 3, and one of my other favorite characters shows up in this particular special, and yet he doesn't show up in any of the movies. Well, not that I know of, anyways. And the fact that he has this really badass sword, which is basically from a giant cross, basically, and his boat he has is basically a coffin, which is quite weird, and he's dressed like a musketeer. Yeah, seriously, he dresses like a musketeer with a white, he basically dresses like a traditional pirate, like a white poofy shirt, the coat, and the fact his cross around his neck is also a small dagger. And also the fact that his title was the world's greatest swordsman. Not much else has been revealed about him aside from the fact that he's had respect for Shanks, and of course Zoro wants to beat him. But I just kind of wish they would explore the guy's backstory at some point. Maybe they will in the future. Depends on what Oda wants to do. Alright. Number 9 is a former member of the Arlong Pirates, and who actually turned good. First appeared in the Arlong Pirate arc, and then he returned for Sabaody. He did not show up in Return to but he did return also for. He's basically show up in basically 2 arcs. This basically is an octopus fishman who did show up in Fishman Island, and the fact that he's a very good character. And it was kind of a joke when basically Cammy and him were in that bar, in Sherry's rip-off bar, that Sherry thought that Hachi and Cammy were a couple, which I thought was hilarious. He's like, no, we're not dating. She's my employee, which I thought was hilarious. And the fact he was member of the Sun Pirates, because they actually had that tattoo on his forehead, and that was also referenced in Amazon Lily. Basically, that's where we got first introduced to the Sun Pirates, and it's because of that tattoo. That's how Boa Hancock basically viewed her backstory with the whole thing with her being a slave. And the fact that it was implied that Hachi was probably a slave. But yeah, it's great the fact that he actually remembers him. But yeah. Alright, number 8. The first commander of the Straw Hat Fleet, Kavish, the guy with a sword. One of the very few characters who actually carries around a sword. He basically is a guy who has a beauty sense of him. And there was a particular flashback where apparently he has a split personality and he's in this town, looks almost exactly like London, and he acts like Jack the frickin' Ripper. I am not kidding. He has this split personality where he goes to sleep and he goes on a killing spree. And in fact, the guy rides a horse. The only character who actually has his own horse, and his pirate knows the beauty pirates, and the fact carries on a rose in his mouth. He has basically in a beauty contest, and he doesn't like the fact that other people have been overriding because of the Worst Generation stuff. I like the name Supernovas better than the Worst Generation. But he's a fun character. The only reason he's hired in Bartimo because he's actually a lot more nicer. He's not as gross as he is. Alright. Number 7. Former warlord and currently in the whole Cake arc. First introduced Impel Down. Basically, it was Impel Down, Marineford, post-war, Fishman Island, and currently also in Whole Cake. Jinbei. Yep. Probably one of the very few characters who actually wears a Komodo in a series that was come out of Japan. And the fact he's a fishman. He's the only other fishman I have on my list, him along with Hachin. Of course, but in the case of Jinbei, he's always been a good guy. Hachin started as a villain, but later turned to good. I'm kind of glad he didn't join the Straw Hat Pirates, probably because Luffy didn't fully trust him that much. He respected him as a friend. Probably because he didn't want to, but in case Jinbei, he probably wanted to because he fought alongside with them against the new Fisherman Pirates. And I love the fact the anime actually showed him fighting a lot more during Marineford than the manga did, which was really nice. I just kind of wish this guy was featured outside of the anime because, well, actually, he did make a cameo in one of the films where they show him as a child. I think it was either in the second, I think it was in Z, where they show like the drawings of the characters as children. I think that's like the only appearance in the movies he's made. Of course, called Boa Hancock appeared in as well, but in the main story, nope, never has. Not that I can think of, anyways. But some say he's ever going to join the crew. Some say also Carrot's going to join the crew as well, which I don't mind. Basically, that would bring up the crew up from 9 to 11. All right, number 6 is another tie between Frankie and Usopp. Frankie, the cyborg human, who basically when he first showed up, he's 36, and now he is 30. He's 34, and now he's 36. And the fact that he got a lot more bulky since the time jump, and the fact that he developed his own motorcycle, which I thought was really cool. And it seems like him and Usopp basically are like the geniuses of the crew, who basically come up with these all cool concepts. and the fact these two take really good care of the ship. Even though, yeah, Frankie really does care about the ship because he practically designed it and he helped build the dang thing. Usopp helps along with him because, and of course, Usopp, who came along with the first ship, the Going Merry, and he took care of the ship the best he could, despite the fact he was not a carpenter. He was basically the ship's sniper. But yeah, and he knows the inner workings of both ships really well. Well, in the case of the Going Merry, because he basically studied it while being part of that ship. But that was probably because Frankie helped him. But two really good characters, despite the fact that Usopp is a coward, but he loves hanging out with Frankie and one of the other characters on my list. But yeah, great characters. All right. Number 5 is Buggy. Yes, Buggy, the second villain introduced in the franchise. And he's probably by far one of my favorite villains. And one of my favorite characters. Because he's that interesting of a character. He first shows up in Rogue Town. He shows up in that cover story, which basically reunited with his crew. Rogue Longtown. After that, I think he shows up a couple times. Like one episode, I think was during Alabasta. Showed up there, and then he showed up in Impel Down, Marineford, post-war, and he showed up in that special, and I think he made one appearance during Zoo Island. But yeah, but after like post-war, he showed maybe, but no, just with the exception of a couple times, it's like he just doesn't really much show up that much anymore. So I think he's a really cool character, and the fact is though, for he can chop himself to pieces and come back together. So I think that's kind of gross, but at least he doesn't spill out blood. Yeah. And he's just that interesting of a character. Either in sub or dub, the guy is still interesting. And the guy has basically made himself his own celebrity. Made himself a celebrity because of what happened during Marineford, and the fact that, despite the fact that the Navy cut off all the cameras, all the transponder snail video snails, he was the only one who actually had a video snail working and actually recorded the death of Whitebeard. Yeah. And of course that he became one of the 7 warlords, which I thought that was interesting. And the fact he teamed up with the first anime villain of the series, Alvida. Now, her pirates, despite the fact they're part of a co-alliance, her crew never showed up after the debut episode. It's like her crew just disappeared. Her ship was still around, but I'm kind of like, what heck happened to her crew? And the fact that first she was chubby woman, and then she just got thin because she ate devil fruit. And I like the fact that she's still his co-captain, despite the fact he's basically a member of the 7 warlords. It's unknown if her bounty is frozen. I'm sure that Buggy's bounty is frozen now, along with his crew's bounties. They probably have sprung up, and he's got one of the most interesting crews. His crew is basically a circus. Yeah. And he has a circus tent on his ship, which I think is so hilarious. And his chief of staff is an acrobat, and one of his other top crew members is a lion tamer. And I'm like, okay, where's the ringmaster? Oh yeah, Buggy's the ringmaster, even though he's a freaking clown. And here's kind of the thing: whenever people bring up his nose, he gets really upset. Because people think that's actually part of like a gimmick, like it can come off. No, it's his actual nose, which I think is so hilarious. But it's not that big of a recurring gag. They did it at the beginning, but later on they actually stopped doing the whole thing of making fun of his nose, which I'm glad they did that because I'm sure at start probably getting kind of annoying. But if they poke fun of his nose again, it would be great. It seems odd though. His last known appearance was in the start of Zoo Island, where he found out that the giant pirates are no longer working for him, part of his mercenary service. But great character nonetheless. And he basically started with his hair like in a ponytail. Then after time jump, he basically decided to let his hair down for some reason. I don't know why though. All right, number 4 is Sanji, Blackleg Sanji, the guy who basically fights with his legs. Yeah, and he's one damn good fighter. And I love the fact that during this arc, it actually explores the guy's backstory because he's probably one of the very few characters whose backstory prior to this arc had never been explored. As far as I can tell right now, the only characters who have not had their backstories explored, Luffy's has been fully explored somewhat, but they haven't explained who his mother is yet. The guy who was number 2 on my list, a lot of the characters have had their backstories explored, except for my number 2 on my list. Excuse me. Not much for Frankie. They haven't shown his parents at all for some reason. I would say just my number two, and probably a little more of a Luffy and Frankie. But aside from that, his backstory is somewhat depressing. It's like his father basically abused him. Well, basically because he wasn't like enhanced like the rest of his siblings were. And the fact he had to wear a mask for a good period of time, like he was the man in the iron mask. And um, one of the common complaints about the character is the fact the character can't show more than one eye at a time because of his long hair. Like before the time jump, his hair covered his right eye, and then after the time jump is basically a switch over with another eye, and his eyebrows pretty much look exactly the same. It's like Oda was being lazy when it comes to that, but he had the least amount of change after time jump. Basically, all he did with him was like switch his hair around, grew some facial hair, and he changed his shirt. That was it. That's the only change they made to the character. His hair is pretty much the same length, but he didn't really change. Like there wasn't like no really big. The only big change that he did was like change his shirt. That's it. But yeah, good character. And my number two is the swordsman of the crew, and also the first mate of the crew, Roanoa Zoro, aka the Pirate Hunter Zoro, who was actually the first person Luffy recruited to his crew. Now, in the anime, he was introduced in episode 1, along with Luffy and Nami, which, okay, that's actually quite interesting. I think in the manga, I don't think he was introduced to like chapter 3, I think it was. Either 2 or 3, because it was like right after chapter 1 was introduced. But yeah, and the fact his common nickname is Mosshead, that is what Sanji calls him. And you gotta love who voices him in the English dub. It's Chris Sabat, the guy who's known for voicing Piccolo and Vegeta from DBZ. And the fact he channels a lot of Piccolo when he does this part. And before I watched One Piece, I watched Fairy Tail, which the woman who voices Luffy, is also did a voiceover on Fairy Tail. Cool. Though Luffy's voiced by a woman, obviously. Just like all of Naruto's was voiced by a woman, actually so currently is. But yeah, it seems like whenever they have young boys in anime, a lot of the time they're voiced by women. Yeah. But Zoro basically, like Sanji, basically started at the age of 19. At the time skip, he turned 21. Now, he turned basically into sort of a traditional samurai with his shirt open. He still had a scar he had pre-time skip. Basically got a new robe, he got a sash, and the fact he got a scar over his eye, that has not been explained yet. But yeah, and the fact he's one awesome swordsman, and the fact he's gone through a few different swords. While in the case of the White Handle sword, that one he's had since the beginning. But in the case of his other swords, one of his swords that he has currently, he actually got that in Rogue Town. The other one he actually got from a dead samurai, which he fought in Thriller Bark, because the other sword that replaced that sword that he got to replace the previous one was broken, because that was destroyed during Edo's lobby by a guy who can turn his other powers. He can turn all metal to rust. But yeah, cool character. That was number 3. Number 2 is Tony Chopper, the ship's doctor. Cute guy, and the fact he's a shape-shifting reindeer. Yep. And the fact the kids love this guy. And Luffy, voiced by a woman. Not kidding. Tony Chopper is voiced by a woman. Yep. He is. He is voiced by a woman. Yeah, which is quite interesting. Fun character. I love the arc that was in. Now, it's nice the fact the arc was introduced. They also explored the character's backstory, which was really nice the fact Oda did that. You don't get that for a lot of the other characters when they're first introduced. Nami, they had to wait like 2 or 3 arcs to basically give her backstory. But Chopper, right in his debut arc. But not in like the first story first showed up. It take a little bit of time, but they did explore his full backstory, which was nice. And the fact he's one fun of a character to watch. And after the time skip, all he got was a new shirt and a new hat, and he got some new forms. But appearance-wise, just a new hat and a shirt. That was it. His shorts are pretty much the same, and he can still. And for his rubber ball, he actually, during his training, he basically can go to all 8 points now. The only reason he would use the rubber ball is if he goes to the monster point. That's the only reason why he's actually a lot more in control of it than he was previously, which was nice. But yeah, fun character, and the fact he actually can talk, and he can talk in his monster form. And my number one favorite male character was not Luffy, and some people who know me, is not very surprising. It is Brook, the Humming Swordsman, or Soul King Brook. And the fact that in the sub, this guy is voiced by a singer. And also, Oda is a huge fan of the singer who basically does Brook's sub voice. The guy who does the dub voice basically is the guy who does Whis from Dragon Ball Super, does the dub voice for him, and of course he did Whis also in the last two films that came out, Battle of Gods and Resurrection F. Yep. Which his voice fits him. It's fine. It's actually really good. It's not much different between the sub and dub, despite the fact that, as far as I know, the dub actor who does Brook is not a singer. But he does sing it really well. And the fact he's funny, his music is good, and the fact that he'd be asked a couple times during the crew meeting. He was asked when he first showed up, and then after they got his shadow back and defeated Gecko Moria, and of course they revealed they knew Laboon, that's when he finally joined the crew. And he was the last person to officially join the crew. And the show, it took until season 10 to do this. In the manga, book-wise, it took until volume 50 for him to finally join the crew. It took him, basically, Thriller Bark in the manga, it took him 5 books, and in the anime, it took him like 1 season. Well, lucky enough, I was able to hear his dub voice before I switched to dub, but I like both. Alright, so that's all I gotta say about my top 10, my top 15 favorite male characters who are not Luffy. Alright, next special number 3, part 1 will be the OVAs and the shorts for One Piece. Okay? But until then, I will see you there. Bye.